Adolescence is a time of questions, curiosities, and discoveries. But for many adolescents while growing up in high adversity environments, there are very few safe spaces for them to explore how they're feeling and to make sense of their inner worlds. Project Catalyst 2.0 is a collective effort in changing that reality by building systems that listen. Building on the success of its 2021 pilot, this expansion of the program is supported by the Spark Fund Award from Global Fund for Children, facilitated by EdelGive Foundation. It aims to strengthen adolescent mental and emotional well-being through structured psychosocial support and through sustained engagement with caregivers. At the heart of this work are facilitators who hold space for adolescents to help them explore emotionally rich and psychologically layered themes and topics, often for the first time. This role comes with a delicate balance. How do you create enough safety for young people to feel comfortable while showing up as they are, and while also inviting them to explore complex and sometimes emotionally difficult terrain? How do you know if a group is ready to go deeper or if they need lightness, pause, or grounding? Join us in this conversation as we discuss, explore, and learn from each other how to navigate this balance in working with adolescents in these sessions.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Michelle. Hi, Cleo. For those who are watching this, I'm Devanshi. I'm the program coordinator at Project Catalyst at the Listeners Collective. And today we're going to have a little conversation about our experiences on the ground while working with the different cohorts that we're working with and how it's going for us. Yeah, Cleo and Michelle, do you want to introduce yourselves?
So I'm Cleo, and I'm a lead facilitator with Project Catalyst.
Yeah, and my name is Michelle, and I'm also a lead facilitator for Project Catalyst.
Okay. And today we're going to talk about, we'll start with a question and we will delve into our own reveries around that question. So we want to explore very deep, psychologically complex layer topics, but at the same time, not make it too threatening and not make it too unsafe. So how do we balance that?
I think I was curious about the similar question. The similar thing was coming up when I was first introduced to Project Catalyst, because at that time I hadn't met any of the students from the cohort. So I was also kind of wondering what this could look like. And I think in the initial sessions, there was a bit of hesitation. There was also a bit of language barrier that was coming up. So I felt like, okay, what I'm saying, is it getting through to them? Are they understanding? Are they feeling confused? And then I was kind of, trying to see how we can try to also change some things and all. But then I think as we progressed through the program, there was a lot more comfort, a lot more safety that was built within the group itself. A lot of like joking around and all that also kind of helped them. And I think that has led to this coming up a little naturally, that where now, because of the relationship that is built between me, the facilitator, Devanshi also as a co-facilitator, and the different cohorts, I think it's very similar to a therapeutic relationship as well, right? Where like in the beginning, you kind of build that comfort and safety, and then slowly you start challenging the client. So I think I see a similar trend here as well. That makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, as you said, even I've been sitting with very similar feelings. At the start of the program, I was wondering when to go a bit deeper, when not to, and I was sitting with that confusion. And I think slowly, as the rapport has built and safety has built, I've been also able to, take smaller risks to also gauge where the group is at and to see how they respond to questions. And as they respond and go a bit deeper, I think it also, I view it as a cue to say, okay, let's see if we can go another step deeper and see how they're responding to it. So that's what I've been doing lately. Yeah. And I think something else that I've also noticed what Devanshi and I have been doing is, especially when the adolescents, since I also had two cohorts, right? There's one group of slightly younger adolescents, one group of slightly older adolescents. So with one of the groups, sometimes Devanshi and I also break it up into smaller groups. And especially with the younger ones, initially we've done it, and I think that's helped because it's a smaller group. There's lesser distraction, and I think all of them have more opportunity to also share their thoughts and opinions on it. And I think it also allows for more nuance to come in because there are fewer opinions and they can be addressed a little bit at a deeper level. Yeah.
That makes sense. I think they all already have groups that they're comfortable and familiar with. So kind of leaning into that a little bit more definitely helps. And I think what I've also noticed is that it's not like the group, like the cohort as a whole, they are all, interacting and they're all sharing on an equal level. I think it takes some students some time. And so to also kind of like notice that and to also give them that space to, on some days be more interactive and on some days to be a little more quiet. Because now I've noticed that the students who were a bit more quiet in the beginning, now they are, opening up a bit more, sharing a bit more. So that is really nice to also see that change there.
Yeah. Yeah. I think as the rapport builds, their trust in the facilitators and the group builds, it allows them space to speak up more or even try voicing their opinion out.
Definitely. Rakshi, what about you?
And as I'm listening to both Cleo, to you and to Michelle, I think I'm also thinking that both of you have your individual strengths which you bring into the groups that you work with. And so, as far as Michelle goes, Michelle is very detailed in how she shows up, and even with simplifying topics for all the cohorts, I think she's great at it. And with Cleo, I think you bring the strength of spontaneity and tuning into what that group or what that group member requires from you in that moment. And I, as the observer, I my role is to make notes, is to see how the group can do better. But when I'm using the word better, I'm also very careful about it in the sense that the group is showing how they can show up in the simplest of senses. That is their capacity, and we work with their capacities rather than their ideal capacity. So if on one day, if the group has a limited capacity, we try and see, okay, so if we have a particular module and if the module is heavy, we don't bring in that heaviness that day. We work with what's happening. So I think both all the four cohorts, they are running on different capacities, different energies. And I think all three of us, we bring in that attunement to what they need in that moment. So that also helps them be quiet on one day if they don't want to speak up, and open up on another day when they do want to speak up, which also answers the question that we have in mind, that how do we balance safety with exploration, that we don't push them into answering why they're feeling a certain way, but if they're able to name a feeling, let's say on one of the days, that's also an achievement, that's also progress. If they're able to just show up on another day, that's also some form of willingness to engage with what's happening from their end. So in all the cohorts, in all the four cohorts, there is a different group dynamic that also unfolds, which is unconscious in nature, which is also building over time. And that also helps us see what the groups are also forming in terms of roles. So let's say if in one of the groups, initially, if someone used to be the funny one, then maybe now they also know that they don't have to be funny to entertain the group. They can also be if not the serious one, they can be the engaging one, the engaged one, that they can simply uh, you know show up. And if there was someone who used to be the serious one, now they're able to know that okay, they can be funny, they can show up in different ways. So
Mm.
I think it's almost like zooming in and zooming out, that each group has its own world, and they are coming from their internal worlds and the group world. So we're working with lots of different worlds in these cohorts.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think also what you brought up quite beautifully, Devanshi, is that while we are looking at exploring psychologically complex topics throughout the program, how this psychological complexity also varies from each session based on their capacities for it. Yeah. And that is very interesting as well.
And I think it makes sense what you also mentioned, that like when there is a module that seems very heavy, or and then it maybe seems like the cohort that on that day does not feel ready for this level, then we kind of try to modify it to reach them wherever they are, rather than them kind of reaching towards the module. So I think that's where maybe the spontaneity and thinking on your feet kind of comes in, where you have to really like check in with them, um, and what else? I think there is a little, it's not like this is always easy, because there is like some issues with like maybe consistency. So sometimes they do tend to forget what has been discussed in the previous session. So then we also need to spend some time in kind of working through that, like again kind of discussing things that we've discussed before. So again, like emphasizing on certain topics and certain concepts, and then seeing what really sticks with them, what they um, kind of understand and what they relate to the most, kind of leaning into that a bit
Mm.
more. That
Yeah.
also, I think, really helps.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you say that, I've been thinking about, what I do to handle challenges when actually explaining topics can be, or rather, understanding topics and explaining that balance becomes difficult. I think what I do is I try to make it as simple as possible. And especially with the younger adolescents, because I face the challenge more over there, I also try to make it as literal as possible. So I bring in like metaphors which are very relatable for them. Yeah, I think it was during the self-care module that we had. I asked them if they had a cycle, and I think, like when you have a cycle, like, do you have a cycle? If your cycle has a puncture, what do you do? And they were all able to answer and relate to that, saying, yeah, we take it, we fill air, we get the tube changed, and things like that. So then I built on that metaphor and told them, okay, so now when you are low on energy, what can you do? Or like, right, what could be a puncture for you? And then they were able to relate to it more. So I think giving them concrete examples also is helping them, relate to the topics
Mm.
with the younger ones.
Yeah,
What else do
definitely.
you do, Cleo? I'm very curious.
Sorry.
What else do you do?
No, I think that reminded me how, they really enjoy the activities. I think that is something
Mm.
present across all cohorts. And that also really like gets them. The different modalities also incorporated in the activities, right? So then there's drawing,
Mm.
there's like moving around. There are these debates that kind of happen, which get them very like competitive. So I think that also helps in kind of, switching things up. And so it's not like a typical classroom setting, right, where we're just speaking and then they're just listening. So I think changing that up also kind of really helps. So gauging their energy levels on each day, because some days they're very tired. They might have like stayed after school or college for, something. So just like getting up, maybe doing a bit of like stretches, that helps. And then keeping the module also light on that day.
Yeah.
So yeah, so not forcing something like, okay, we need to kind of get we need to get through this module, so they need to listen through the entire thing, but again gauging where they're at and then modifying it accordingly.
Yeah. balancing complexity and fun and ease at the same time.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Devanshi, recently you brought in like a whole different perspective and, I think this was with the younger adolescents. I was having a bit of a challenge with explaining beliefs. And the topic was more about explaining beliefs and how beliefs change over time. And I was finding it challenging. And then you made this little drawing on the board of like a baby, someone like a baby at 1 year, someone else at 5 years, and then at like 8 years, and then you made it like their current age, and then at 30 years. And then you ask them, like, okay, what does this baby know about themselves or about the world? And then you slowly like built on that understanding as well. And then they were able to say that, okay, that, my understanding of the world has increased with times, and we were able to bring in how beliefs form and opinions form about interpersonal relationships and all of that. I thought that was very helpful.
Thank you for bringing up, Michelle, that particular point. I think, as you said that, I also started thinking that, why we need to center the needs of um, the adolescents that we're working with, because then that's the goal behind doing any community work. If we centered our own needs, of course, when we are delivering these modules or when we're working these kids, we have certain program level needs and goals. But when we center the kids, that's the whole essence of doing community work and doing a psychosocial intervention in the first place.
Yeah. And every time we meet up and talk, it's so interesting because though it's the same topics, the way it lands with each cohort is so different. Yeah. And I experience it between my two cohorts itself. And then when I speak to Devanshi or Cleo over our debriefs, I'm like, wow. So it could have even turned out that way. And it's so fascinating how with each group, each module has a life of its own.
Yeah, and I think also we do this check-in and check-out for each module, and that's how we kind of start and end the sessions. And I think that also kind of, sends the message to the students that what you're feeling and where you're at is also important. And for the checkout, we also ask them something that they enjoyed in the session, something that they didn't like, or something new that they learned. So that also sends a message that that what you're feeling in these sessions, also what you're understanding or feeling confused about, is important. So kind of opening that channel for feedback, and then so like regularly asking them, like, if there is something that you're not understanding, then please tell us. Also, there are some words maybe in English that are a little difficult that some students might seem confused about. So also kind of asking some students who've understood it to translate it in Tamil for the other ones. So kind of checking that everyone is on the same page in that way, and seeing and who looks a little confused and who doesn't. And I think that has also really helped in keeping the group cohesive in that way, like that the learning is cohesive. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think also tuning into the needs of each individual member during those times also offers them a sense of belongingness and safety, which helps make, the complex topics not as threatening as well. Yeah. I was also thinking about, like what is it that we do to ensure that the topics don't become threatening? And while I was reflecting on that, I was thinking about how the program prioritizes autonomy and not giving autonomy really, but when we also prioritize autonomy, like we ask them questions, right? But if they do not want to answer, we respect it and step back over there. I think that also contributes a lot to making sure that it's not threatening for them. What do you all think? Is there anything more as well that you all have noticed?
So when we use the word threat, it's usually, interpreted as something which is not welcomed, something that's beyond one's capacity and one's um, willingness to engage with at that moment. So something feels unsafe and threatening. So I think then another word that comes to my mind is ambivalence. That, let's say we're asking them a question in a group discussion, and if it's bringing up ambivalent feelings or mixed feelings among the group members, how do we hold space for that? Because ambivalence in a group setup is bound to take place. It is bound to come up. That some group member may have a very concrete perspective that this is how I think and this is how I view the world, but another one may have a more um, unformulated thought process that this is what I think, but this is what I also think. So I have a conflict within me. So I think
Yeah.
I do notice both you and Cleo and Michelle that both of you do hold space for it by gauging whether you want to ask more questions about the ambivalence or to maybe address it one-on-one later. Um, but we also see that if the group member wants to share something later, they come to us on their own without having to tell them to do that. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts on ambivalence, and because when we're talking about safety and dealing with psychologically complex topics, and ambivalence is bound to come up for all of us, even as facilitators. And do we address something? Do we not address something? So I'm wondering, how do you work with ambivalence at the moment, and any ideas as to how you want to work with it in the rest of the sessions that we have?
I think when we meet monthly and we kind of discuss our experiences with the cohorts, I think that definitely helps when there is some ambivalence in terms of whether to address something or not. And I think what is important to keep in mind is, again, these are their experiences. So some things, might be okay for them on a daily basis, which we, again, coming in from a different perspective, we might be kind of judging very quickly as like right or wrong, but then kind of seeing their dynamic and whether like that sometimes there's a little bit of like using like some words like calling each other stupid, but that's again like that happens playfully, and then we might as facilitators be coming in as like, okay, but this is wrong, you should not be doing this, and maybe we can say it to them once, but then their response is usually like, oh, like, we're just joking. And if you see that the other student who's also been called stupid also is of that opinion, then that's when we also like kind of make the decision to, let it go and not kind of push it and try to again give them like a moralistic lecture or anything like that. Because it's important to remember that we're also coming in for like a few hours in their day. We can't kind of change their entire experience and all. So understanding, but again, sometimes like when they're using a word like retarded, which has some kind of connotation to it, so then understand, giving them like a bit of background on why it is wrong to use this word, and then leaving it up to them to make that decision to whether to engage with it or not. Again, autonomy comes in over there, so giving them the tools, and then it is kind of up to them how they want to engage and use it.
I think that answers your question around what you were asking, Michelle, about autonomy. That how do we make space for an environment which has autonomy as a given, rather than us having to give it to them. So I think what Cleo also is mentioning answers some part of it.
Yeah, I think also when I was reflecting on this, right, I was thinking about mm, how much space do we create for autonomy as facilitators in the room. And I think it comes up in many different ways as well, right? So sometimes when I notice ambivalence in the room, I just stay with it for myself. And then sometimes I do have the urge to jump in and, say, but it's okay to hold both of these. But I think when I think about autonomy, sometimes what I've been doing lately is to ask the group, like, how do you feel about this perspective coming up? How do you feel about your own response? And more or less, they end up bringing in the group agreements. And thankfully, I think our group agreements are quite solid in that way. So they themselves say things like, yeah, we need to respect what the other person is saying, or we need to listen to what others say. And I think autonomy comes from there as well, where they themselves decide how to go about it at times without me having to actively intervene all the time. Yeah. I also do come back and reflect, on, okay, how could this be handled differently in another context? And I think when I really have questions that I sit with, then I bring it into our monthly debriefs, and hearing the team's perspectives is extremely helpful because there's more than one way to handle every situation, and it gives me different ideas of what I could do in a similar situation in the future.
Yeah, I think for all of us, it's very crucial that we talk to each other about what's happening, and to really discuss in these debriefs that something is unfolding and I'm feeling unsure as to how to work with it and how to deal with it. Because as much as we are facilitating these experiences for um, the adolescents, but we also become a participant in those experiences, and it may bring up heavy feelings for us. It may bring ambivalent feelings for us, confusing feelings, which we at least it does for me. I begin to think about my adolescence and how I used to be as an adolescent, with a lot of mixed feelings about different worldviews. And even till now, we're still navigating as adults in terms of worldviews, in terms of outlooks. But I think it's a very sensitive developmental age that we're working with in our demographic setup. So it is something that I think all three of us keep in mind when we're working with them.
Yeah.
And adolescents also may want to feel seen, but also may want to hide, like almost like a hide and seek game, wherein they're becoming quiet in one of the sessions, but speaking up quite a lot in another. So I think all three of us, we also don't make that too obvious. Of course, we name um, anything that is sensitive or anything that is being addressed in the sessions, which may make the group setting heavy for everyone. But I think we also let um, the adolescents be in that manner, that we don't necessarily name the roles that, oh, today you're being very funny, or today you're being very serious, today you're being very quiet. If they want to jump in, if they want to, speak up, if they want to say something, we let them. And it's more about what they want to do during that particular day. So I think some sense of structure that we have in mind, but also some sense of autonomy that is established already as part of these group settings. So if they're having a headache, we don't really monitor them that, oh, you can't have a headache today, you can have a headache. So I think that's also us modeling something for them, that you can be a complex person, you can have complex feelings, you can have a headache towards the beginning, but you can also towards the end, if you liked the session, if you liked your own participation and the other group members' answers and experiences, you can maybe smile also towards the end of the session if they want to. So
Yeah. I think what you're bringing out is that how within the group setting, they have the freedom to experiment with different roles, with different behaviors, and different feelings that they're sitting with, and to just be as they are on the day that they want to be that way, without bringing too much attention to it, for them to figure it out on their own. Yeah.
Yeah, because we already have some structure kind of in place with the group agreements, with the check-in, check-out, and the way the modules also go. And I think, and usually it is pretty activity heavy, and that also gets them excited, engaged. So yeah, that does leave a lot of space for them to also explore how they want to be on that day as well. And I think we also, because we're not alone in facilitating, I think we have Devanshi as a co-facilitator. So we also, tend to be ourselves and kind of interact. So that also leaves that space, open for play, for them to also kind of, lean on one another when they might be feeling a little bit like confused or overwhelmed. And I do see that a lot of like dynamics, maybe one student is understanding things a little bit better than the other ones, and then they will kind of explain things to the other student. So that is also nice that support comes in.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is the first time we've gotten to sit down and talk about all of this at such length. And I see so many similarities in our experiences, and there's also so much to learn as well from each of your perspectives. And I think I'll be reflecting on this over the next few sessions.
Yeah, that's what I didn't know that we could. There was so much to it, but once we really started talking, then I think it all our experiences came up so naturally. And I think I'll also be using some of what we have discussed today in the next few sessions.
So it looks like we are reaching the end of our discussion, and we highlighted and touched upon themes of safety, of structure versus autonomy, or structure and autonomy. And we reflected on our own experiences of us being facilitators and how we show up with the group members of our cohorts. So I think it was a very fruitful discussion, and we can come back to this again whenever time permits for all three of us, and we can revisit this conversation.